What's up guys, Frank Finelli here, and I have a big question to answer. In 2023, is it still possible to go on Facebook Marketplace and find yourself a fully dressed 440 motorhome engine with low mileage and a 727 transmission for $300 and bring it home? The answer is actually right behind me, and it is yes. You can still do it. This is not something that happens every single day by any means. You know, I go on Facebook Marketplace maybe once or twice a year, but those few times that you do, in all reality, you know, you're just always keeping your ear to the ground. Like I said in my last video, if you guys watched the 71 Roadrunner video that we just posted, listen, look around, what's going on out there. There's always opportunities and stuff to do. Sure, the prices have gone up all over the board, across the board in the classic car, muscle car game as far as cars to buy, project car prices, parts, and all that sort of stuff. But there are still those good deals to be had out there. There are just people just looking to get rid of the stuff that they have. You know, it's just laying around their garage for too long and it's taking up space, and you know, finally someone takes a bite on it after it's been sitting for 5 weeks, and you come along and what do you know? This thing right here is a 13,000 mile 1978 440 long block, everything on it. This whole box right here has got all the accessories. It's got a thermoquad from what I could see. I haven't gone through any of this stuff yet. You guys are about to see the whole video where I took a quick road trip with Odie, went up to Idaho. It was about a 3-hour drive, so a 6-hour round trip. Totally worth it. Grabbed all these parts. The guy put it in here with a forklift. Couldn't really ask for a more simple and easy load up, honestly. Usually I'm hand picking up crap with people and loading up myself, but this time was way easy, honestly, almost too easy. So you'll see that in just a minute, but you know, here we are about to unload all this stuff, and again, you know, in the car hobby, things are a little bit more pricey these days. You know, a 440 short block or even just a bare block for a 440 could go anywhere from $300, $400, $500 depending on what year block it is, what it came out of. For a basic 78 motorhome block like this, a little bit less desirable than say a 1968, 69 block that might be sought after a little bit more for trying to year match it to a car that you might be trying to build for, say, a 69 Super E like I've got, right? But 78 440 essentially is the same exact thing as that 69 block. There's not much construction differences at all in the engine itself, especially if you're going to get this thing machined like we've got Roger right here in town. There's really no differences. A 440 is a 440. You machine that thing, you build it up how you want, whether it was made in 1965 or 78. And there's a fun fact for you guys as well. 1965 being the first year through 78 is the last year for the big block 440. Anyway, enough rambling. We're going to show you guys what we actually took home right about now.
You excited, Odie boy? I'd be too, man. We're about to go grab some cool car parts. Let's do it.
Okay, Odie boy. So we're heading up into Idaho right now. I got my man Otizio, Odie, hanging out with me. It's gonna be a little less than 3-hour road trip. Come across a really good deal on Facebook Marketplace. eBay, something like that, and you just can't pass it up. 1978 440 out of a motorhome with 13,000 miles on it and a 727 transmission for $300. Honestly, I spent more than that on grocery shopping this week. These are the kind of things you want to have available for your project vehicles. You know, there's going to be a time when you're going to want to slap an engine and transmission in something you just bought, and now all of a sudden you've already got it on hand. And the bottom line is, sometimes you just come across a really good deal and you just can't pass it up because they're not being made anymore. Sure, they made thousands and thousands of 440s out there, but they don't land in your lap every day for less than the cost of groceries. So here we go. I want to know what Odie is. The U.S. has got so many amazing places. Hope you guys all get to see stuff like this too. Coming into Idaho. Heck yeah. All right, Odie boy, we're almost there. Make sure you shout out when you see it. Yeah, good boy. Okay, that was pretty sweet. Not every day that you get a forklift load up over here, so thanks a lot to Kelly for selling me this stuff here. It's gonna be pretty freaking awesome. It's a very complete set right out of what looks like a motorhome for sure. We'll evaluate these parts more when we get home. For now, time to hit the road. Okay guys, just got home, pulled out the engine crane, got a couple other things ready, so I'm just gonna get this backed up into the driveway and show you what we got. So we made it home with our stash, and now I actually want to go through all this stuff, and I'll talk through you guys what we have. We can kind of compare this to some of the other parts we have in the garage and discuss further. So here's our victory pile, and like I said, this is a pretty awesome score. I mean, usually when I buy engines and spare parts, you might wind up with just the block. Maybe it's a short block and it's got a crank in it still if you get lucky, but to get a full engine, I'm talking the full engine and every single part and accessory that came on this thing, the 727 transmission and every single thing here in this box, you know, these parts, yeah, a lot of them might need to be refurbished and cleaned up, but some of them are pretty rare and original, and these could be reused in different applications for different projects that you have. And, you know, for a guy like me, this is a freaking score. This is a gold mine. Someone like you at home, this may not matter to you as much, and that's totally fine. You know, when we talk about this engine right here, if this truly is a 13,000 mile motorhome engine, and we can verify that pretty well by pulling off the cylinder heads and, you know, looking down the bore and taking ourselves a measurement and looking at the condition of the cylinder walls, you know, this thing could be a total score for you. You could actually probably actually dingle ball hone this thing, really. Get a set of new pistons, rings, you know, a bigger cam if you want, new lifters and all that stuff. Get the heads cleaned up and slap it back together and have yourself a good running 440 that's a bunch of good power for your hot rod, and, you know, it make most people pretty damn happy. You know, this may be something that we can actually do that with. In my case, I'm fortunate to have Roger, like I said, and we can always go over to his shop, pull this thing apart, strip it down, machine it, bore it out, 30 over if we need to, and build it up as much as we want to. You guys might notice here on the crank, one key thing, this harmonic balancer, you see how it's tapered? It's a little bit wider here in the back and thinner up front. You kind of look at it from the front, you can see it kind of angles this way, right? It's not totally the same dimensions front to rear. This indicates that this is actually a cast steel crank, not a forged. You'll also notice the width of it. It's probably about 2 inches wide. The ones that you'll see on a forged steel crank are symmetrical both sides as far as, you know, there's no taper like this, and it's a lot thinner. It's maybe about an inch wide. So that's one quick giveaway about what kind of crankshaft is in your engine. And again, is that super critical here? Really, no. We're not trying to push more than, you know, what we could probably make naturally aspirated and break this thing. Honestly, if we were trying to go into a boosted application, maybe we'd want to upgrade to ourselves to get a forged crank. But cast crank, I've seen plenty of videos of guys online talking about and running even a couple boosted applications with a forged crank or a cast crank and not blowing it up. So not a huge concern. Sure, everyone likes the bragging rights of saying, you know, they've got a 440 with the forged crank and all the good stuff and blah, blah, blah. But in all reality, this thing is still super strong, and it's going to do plenty good for anything that we could really throw it into. So I'm not ultra concerned about it. But like I said, if we decide that this engine needs to go in a more specific application that we want, we could always get ourselves an aftermarket crank or find ourselves a donor crank from a different engine. Not a huge issue by any means. Being that this is from 1978, these cylinder heads are likely maybe some 346 or, you know, some later casting with maybe 8.6-to-1 compression, you know, pretty low compression there in the late 70s, but we can get a look at those casting numbers. This engine, just as it is, wouldn't really make a whole lot of power, all things considered. I think for the late 70s, probably under 200 horsepower, but we can get an exact number for you guys later. Unfortunately, the guy that I bought this from kind of dug into it and ripped it apart, and that's probably, you know, plays into the price a little bit. For the average person that may not have Roger around the corner, like I said, you probably might, you know, maybe second guess buying this thing, because essentially he stripped it down, pulled the crank out, pulled out the pistons, pulled the heads off of it, pretty much gutted the whole engine, and that probably didn't really need to happen. He said that there was a wasp nest that was seen on top of one of the cylinders, and honestly probably could have pulled the head off, cleaned up the top of that piston and kept it together. And if this engine was kept together as a short block, meaning the crank, the pistons, all were still inside the engine along with the camshaft, you know, this thing could easily be cleaned up as it was, maybe throw a new set of aluminum cylinder heads on it, clean the engine up, brush it up a bit, spray it with some new paint or whatever, and slap it in something. And sure, would it be putting out a whole lot of horsepower? Probably not. If you're getting a good machine job on it, would do a whole lot better. But if you're looking for just a bare bones, quick, slap it in your car and, you know, having yourself a 440 like you guys have seen plenty of times with Freiberger and Finnegan with the General Mayhem, this thing would do plenty good. But unfortunately, we don't have that here. He already gutted it. So essentially the crank is still sitting in it right now. The heads are bolted back onto it, but there's no pistons in it. So it's kind of a halfway between tear down, rebuild. We can't really use the engine quite exactly the same way right now. If I really wanted to, sure, I could examine these cylinder walls, clean them up, dingle ball hone it, get myself those pistons or a new set of pistons, get a new cam, new lifters, but at that point you may as well just do things kind of the rest of the right way. So not really a huge issue, but that's sort of where we are with the condition of this engine right now. It still looks really clean, but we still got to get it out and we can rip a head off, look inside the cylinder walls and give you guys a full look. I'm also noting with this transmission, it's got a really short tail, and that's probably because it was in a camper or motorhome, like we said. So right behind this back part of the bell housing, there's a longer tail housing that goes on a 727 for a Mopar B-body, and one of which I can show you in the garage. This 727 is going to go in my 69 GTX, and you guys can clearly see here the much longer tail shaft. I think it's like 18.5 inches long, and this is what goes on a B-body. And so I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have a problem with disconnecting that and getting a longer tail shaft. So this transmission isn't 100% ready to slap into a B-body like a lot of the cars that I love having, but nonetheless, it's still a great start. It looks super clean, and probably has low miles on it too. So honestly, you know, it may not be a big deal. Here's the factory torque converter. This thing right here is probably, who knows, 2,800, 2,500 stall speed. I don't really quite know. It would have come in, you know, motorhome. Then we look at this box of glory. You've got everything from this big ass, like 18-inch factory air cleaner, David Freiberger's favorite thermoquad, some ignition components, fan, valley pan cover, starter, hoses, alternator, power steering pump, looks like a water pump, probably the intake, coil, fuel pump. Just seeing a lot of stuff. Like I said, this thing was totally complete. You kind of stripped it down, and that's where we're at right now. And so a lot of these little things right here, even if you wanted to buy like that alternator from someone, that's like 30, 40 bucks maybe at a swap meet. This carburetor, if it was still good, a lot of people don't really like thermoquads, but it could be worth 20 bucks. You know, this power steering pump might be worth 50, 60 bucks if it's still in good condition. The starter, I mean, these things are kind of dime a dozen, but the thing likely still works. Pretty damn hard to kill a Chrysler starter. Those things freaking go forever. You know, a lot of these little accessories, not super valuable in and of themselves, but still sitting in this box is probably $200 worth of good stuff right here in all reality. That transmission, you can get a transmission core online for anywhere from $200-300, and being that this one needs a tail shaft, maybe worth a little bit less, but still, the thing's still got to be worth about $200, I'd say, just based upon its general condition and looking like it's pretty fresh. And this engine, being that it is mostly a long block, even though it's kind of gutted like we said, this thing's probably worth $400-500 as is. And I was able to score all the stuff you see in front of you for 300 bucks. Like, this guy didn't need this stuff anymore, just laying around his garage, and I was the willing hand that was raised to come up and get it, and here it is. And like I said, every now and then a rare opportunity like that comes your way and you get some cool stuff. And who doesn't love ripping through old iron like this? I guess maybe it's an addiction of mine. I freaking love it. So this is what we got right here. We're gonna pull this out now and we can look a little bit closer. As far as supplies and materials, what I got out here, obviously we got our engine cherry picker, pull the engine out. This old radio flyer, I think Alex got this thing from the landfill. The wheels are all wobbly and beat up, but it does great rolling around. 727 transmissions, they fit right into it. The thing does pretty good. Once the engine's up, you can push it right into the garage really easy and keep them organized underneath the workbench. This thing, the yard cart, I'm gonna slap all these accessories in there. Then I got some extra boxes over there in case you want to break down further and organize all these parts. So again, right now, just grab this whole hoard and stick it in the yard cart. Sweet. Okay, so now this we can go ahead and break down further, and I'll show you guys that in a little bit. We're gonna yank out this transmission. You get it. In the yard. I don't know what these things weigh, but it's really not a whole lot in all reality, especially with this shorty tail shaft on it. This thing's likely still full of fluid, so just being mindful that as I tilt it, it might dump out, gush out everywhere, but not a huge deal. All of these lines, probably would never reuse them. These are the cooler lines that would go to the radiator to cool the transmission. Probably just gonna strip those off. This is a shifter cable, dipstick tube, I think, with some sensor on it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, just so this stuff we'll get off later, but for now, let's get rid of some garbage. Yeah, it's not too bad. I'd say it probably weighs about 100 120 pounds, something like that. So here's our 727 motorhome tranny with that little shorty tail shaft. Like I said, we'll get ourselves a B-body, big block extension tail housing, and it'll fit up plenty good. Fly away! Okay, now with the torque converter, these things are almost impossible to fully drain. And it's kind of on you whether you want to reuse these things or not. Again, if we were going to slap this thing back together, if this engine was pretty much ready to run, probably would. If I was going to rebuild this transmission and clean it up, maybe not. I would definitely have stuck a rag and plugged up the top of this thing so dust and debris wasn't falling into it. Did that happen over in that guy's garage? Maybe. It doesn't look too bad. You can always pour out the transmission fluid, take a little evaluation of it, see what it looks like. But you know, if you got a little gunk and grime and stuff inside this thing, it's just going to spit it back out into your transmission. It could screw things up. Use it at your own risk, basically. Good to have on hand though. You never know when you need a spare part like this. Okay, now for the main event, what we've all been waiting for is to get a closer look at this 440. But it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get this thing out because I don't know if my cherry picker is going to reach in with the shell on it. Might have to pull the tailgate off and try and shimmy this engine out a little bit, but I don't know if it will. I don't know. Let's try. Maybe put this ratchet strap back on and see if we can't ratchet strap pull it out. We can let the ratchet strap kind of serve as a come along. It's actually moving the whole pallet. That's all right. If that's the case, maybe I can shimmy the whole pallet myself. Let's see. Okay. It's a little easier than I thought it would be. Come on. Use your back, not the legs. In the daylight. Beautiful. Perfect. Okay, now I need to take the tailgate off. It's awesome. Okay, on your cherry picker, super easy, shortcut. I just saw what I just did. Pick the ram up like that, pump it up a few times instead of actually having to jack it up all the way to get it where you need it to be. Now make sure we set our boom out to a good length. This being a semi-short, longish block, half-ton setting would be fine, even if this thing had pistons, the intake, and it was a total long block. Half-ton would still do it, I think. Fully dressed 440s, maybe 650, 700 pounds, something like that. And what's half a ton? 1,000 pounds? So, should be alright. Oh, by the way, it's July 28th, 2023, and it was 99 degrees today, and it's probably 98 degrees right now. It's still hot as shit, so you see me sweating, that's why. Another little thing I do, I always keep a chain, some hardware on my cherry picker, just so it's ready to grab your next engine. And with the 440 and most bolts, usually pretty easy to grab a bolt hole on the front of a cylinder head, and then one on the back on the bell housing area. Looks like this one's got a broken stud in it, so we probably have to go this one here, and then go on that side on the back. You want to make sure you get a decent amount of threads, but you don't have to go insane on cranking this down, obviously, because we're not having to hold two parts together. It's more shear tension, hoping that this bolt wouldn't break. And I'm actually just going to go back right here on the back of this cylinder head and kind of alternate what we did up front, and leave probably about, 6 inches above clearance from the top of the cylinders or the valve covers for some chain to be able to snag with the hook. I'll just go right here. Okay, that should do it. Getting cherry picker in place. Careful not to break your glass. Okay. And we're nearly spot on with that. Just need to lower it a hair. Not so easy to do one-handed, but I'm giving it a go for you guys. There we go. Okay, strapped in there. Okay, we can start cranking. Get this thing out of here. Coming up. Watch the glass on the shelf. Okay, we're far enough to be able to clear that box now. Sorry. Let's get this crate kind of out of the way and we'll pull this engine back and clear the tailgate. The driveway being on a slant like that, all this weight's just going to want to push the low side, so just going to kind of fight the cherry picker a little bit. Little engine cradle the guy built for it. Nothing wrong with that. But lo and behold, there it is. 78-440 floating up in the air. Let's get our little rolly dolly. Slap it right on there. I wonder if this thing will fit. That's actually pretty nifty. Makes it perfect, because usually these blocks fit decent on these little dollies, but that's money. Make sure we clear the tailgate, and we are. Let's come on down. Almost clear. That's a little better. Into your little cradle. There we go. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Little cradle is an awesome idea. I'm gonna have to use that from now on. I guess it's mine now, obviously. I bought it with the engine, so I get to keep it. There it is. The 440. Nice. I also forgot at the front of the bed, we had cast iron manifolds for the exhaust. Not ultra valuable, don't flow great at all, but I don't know, great paperweights we've got. And here's our little builder's box of parts he took off the engine. Looks like we got timing chain, pickup tube, pistons, rocker arm, shafts and assemblies, lifters. All the rods are still on the pistons, obviously. Push rods. That's what these lifters look like. They aren't dished in all too much, but there definitely is a bit of scoring at the top, and you can see a distinct groove. Might be a little bit more than 13,000 miles going on here. Not terrible though. Let's look at another one. That one's actually really nice. Almost no deformation on the top. Okay, let's get a third test. Okay, this one is also really clean, not dished and concaved and deformed, pitted. Okay, fourth one, gotta know now. All right, this one's pretty nice too. So maybe there's just a bad adjustment on, well actually no, these are non-adjustable rocker shafts, so I don't know. For some reason though, that one lifter was kind of wearing quite a bit more than the other ones that we sampled here, this guy. But the rest of them are looking pretty cherry.
So not weighing out this being a 13,000 mile engine just yet. After looking at that, let's look at a piston. Skirt here on the side of the piston, pretty clean, only a couple of vertical scoring marks on it. Same side over here, looking okay. There's a good amount of carbon buildup at the top of these factory cast aluminum flat top pistons. You can see the offset wrist pin as well. It sticks out a little bit more on this side than that side. And your factory LY stamped. These are forged steel rods. They're actually pretty damn good rods for factory setup. But these pistons look pretty good as far as wear goes on the skirt. Definitely either was not tuned well or didn't change their oil too often for that 13,000 mile run. Top of this one, I don't know if he cleaned it up or if that's just how it was. Skirt's looking good. A little bit of scoring on that one, but not terrible. This guy here, again, pretty good on the skirt. Decent amount of deposit up top again. More deposits on this guy, but a really clean skirt. Okay, maybe 26,000 miles. I don't know. I'd say kind of hard to get that much carbon buildup for just 13,000 miles. So maybe let's bump it up to 40,000 miles at this point, but still pretty good. Still pretty good, all things considered. Again, as we were looking at this transmission, for example, not totally gooked and gunked up. Inside the bell housing here at the front of the pump, really clean. You know, that's either been rebuilt or it's just in really good shape. We don't really know exactly yet. Now we need to pop off these valve covers and look really down inside the cylinder walls. If we look in the valley here, the 440, you can see the lifter bores are all pretty clean. For a high mile engine, one that didn't have a lot of oil changes, wasn't cared for, you'd see all sorts of tarry, gooked up, black, just nasty oil sitting down here. See just a little bit of oil, but that's not too bad, not at all. I've seen way, way, way worse on other engines. So this thing's pretty clean as far as we're looking at there in the valley. Looking at the cam, top of these lobes, it looks pretty good. That cam is pretty clean. Again, we don't know the full history. This thing still could have been gone through by someone, but if this truly is untouched, factory original from 78, that's a pretty clean cam. Might still be holding us at the 40,000 mile mark we're maybe thinking. And here's our Chrysler Corporation sticker and some of our exhaust and emissions information. 78. Another quick and key way to know that you've got a 440. We've talked about this in many videos, but if this is your first one with us, welcome. We love our big iron 440s and 383s, big block Mopar stuff. What the hell is that? I've never seen that before. I wonder, I'm sure. So like a direct shot down here. Oh, maybe so you could shoot your timing light with a flashlight and look right where it's hitting there, like a little periscope. I don't know. If someone knows more than me in the comments, you can let me know what this little, looks like almost like a filler tube, but obviously it's going visual right onto the harmonic balancer, which would then tell you where your timing marks are. But anyway, getting distracted here. On your 440, you always know it's a 440 because, well, it's a 440, Frank. Well, no, actually, looking at the front of it, if you know that it is for sure a Mopar big block you're going to go buy, but you don't know if it's a 383 or 440, the dead giveaway, right next to the distributor, you've got the data pad. This flat rectangular surface here is seen on all 440 big blocks. And this is also seen on 413 and 426 RB Mopar big blocks and also on the 426 Hemi. But obviously if you're buying one of those, you'd probably have a seller that knew what they had, but not always. But then you look a little bit closer though, and you'll find out for more. But on the 383, you're not gonna have this. You'll have right about here, some sort of casting number or some sort of stamping that'll indicate that it's a 383. But here on this data pad, it's not gonna be your casting number, but what it is gonna tell you is some other key information. You've got 8T440. And if you look on a a guide that I'm going to post up right about now. You'll note that 65 was the first year for the Mopar 440, and then every subsequent year they assigned a letter that indicated what year this engine was actually assembled in and then put into that given vehicle. And I brought myself some sandpaper too to kind of clean it up a little bit. But yeah, you got 8 Tango 440 E and a 6 and a 7. And there's a little bit more as to what some of these other numbers wind up meaning, but your 8T should stand for 1978. And then your 440 obviously is telling you that this is a 440. If it was a 1969 block, you'd see an E 440, and that would tell you that it was a 1969 assembled 440 going into your car. But the year that this engine was assembled, put into your car, may not be the same year that the engine block was cast. Well, the block could have been cast in 77, but put together and assembled in 78 and put into that camper. And then you'll know over here on the passenger side with your casting numbers when this block was actually made. Right up here, we're looking at a date. Can't see really. Just kind of in visual defilade here, having a hard time seeing, so let's clean that up real quick. There we go, get us a little more contrast. Looks like February 24th of 78. So this was an early year 78 block that was cast, and then it was subsequently assembled, put together, and slapped into that camper right in that year. And like I said, this is the last year that Chrysler produced the infamous 440 block. So this is a final year production engine, which doesn't make it really worth anything more than it is, but it's just kind of cool to know that. You can go online, you can Google these casting numbers all day. These will indicate further information about when they were produced. But you've got 400, 6630, 440-8. Again, another quick indication this is a 440. And then you'll also get some more information about when it was made. D stands for day, N for night, and then there's a little button underneath each of them basically, and this little arrow, you see this pointer here? That points and indicates to you that this is cast at nighttime, so the night shift, in case there was an issue with when the production line was making these blocks and they found out there was cracks in the walls or something like that, they could go back and find the whole batch that was produced on the night shift back on this day in 78 and scrap them all basically, figure out what the hell went wrong. And here you've got a little clock. Get even more specific, and here on your clock it looks like we're at about, I don't know, we'll call that 8, 9 o'clock. So 8 or 9 o'clock at night on February 24th, 1978, this engine was cast. This block at least. Popped into the shop real quick to grab some tools, and real quick to show you guys, there's another earlier video I have of me stripping down this 69 440 block, which is gonna go on my 69 Super B. This engine, this thing was a wild story. This thing was sitting out in a field or something. The pistons were seized to the wall, and Roger and I ripped this whole thing apart. Literally had to drill the pistons out with a freaking drill and smash them out and get this thing pretty well cleaned up. And you can see the way it looks right now. It went through the engine burner and was cleaned up, but it's actually in really great shape now. But if you want to watch that video, it's really fun. You could see us tear apart this whole frozen and stuck engine and how we did that. But I'm showing you this because, like I said before, on the data pad here is a 69 block, and you've got the E440, like I was saying, which tells you this block was assembled in 1969. Then when you come over here, you've got your date. You've got November 4th of 1968. Okay, like I was telling you, this block was cast in 68, however, assembled in 69. So little things like this, I love the little archaeology of these Mopar pieces. And here we've got another 69 block as well. This one's gonna be going in the 69 GTX that we've got, but this thing, same sort of situation over here. You'll see your E440 for 1969. All right, let's pop a valve cover off and see what's hiding in there. I gotta know. Obviously everything is nice and loosened up because he had already gone through this thing, so we don't have to really fight too hard to get this taken apart. And as you guys saw on the parts pile, he had already pulled off the rocker shaft, so that's why we're looking pretty clean. And yeah, these heads are really clean. I didn't see a wash tank over at the shop. I highly doubt he cleaned the inside of these cylinder heads. These things are really clean. This
this might be another indication moving us back off of that 40,000 mile mark, maybe towards 26,000 again. I mean, you know, again, we're just throwing numbers up in the air, but if I was told 13,000 miles on this engine, we looked at those lifters so far, most of them were really good. The valley pan area, really clean. The skirts on the pistons, general wear on the pistons, really good. Yeah, there's a lot of carbon at the top of them, kind of curious, but up here inside these cylinder heads, way clean. Like, you can almost eat out of these things. Our casting number, these are your 452 cylinder heads. There's actually a decent casting number, the 452s. I think they flow pretty well. They're nothing, you know, the 906s, the 915s are kind of the more desirable, better flowing, high performance cylinder heads that came out on, you know, your late 60s Mopar big blocks. But your 452s, I think they do a decent job kind of for what they are. Everyone kind of talks smack on Chrysler Mopar big block cylinder heads, and yeah, it's true. It's kind of a small block Chevy head for a big motor. Valves could be way bigger, but in all reality, decent set of heads for what it is and what it's doing. So I'm pretty impressed. Even the top of the valve where this would ride on the rocker shaft, not seeing any distortion up here. Really clean. This is still looking like a really good score, but we need to pull this head off. I've got to look at these cylinder walls. That will be the total telltale sign of how old or fresh this engine really is. Okay, these are 11/16 bolts, and it looks like they're like hand tight in there. So should be pretty quick and easy to pull this head apart. So again, it kind of made our lives a little bit easier here. If this thing was still torqued down to spec, be a little bit harder, and if it was the proper way, wait for this Chrysler car to go by. And if these were actually still torqued to spec and we cared about this engine a lot, you'd want to do the same, you'd want to go reverse order from how they were torqued on here. So that you start in the middle and work your way out when you're torquing them on. When you're taking them off, you start on the outside and work your way in. But because these were already pulled off and they're just hand threaded on here, we're just getting them off. And of course I forgot my extension, so I'm just trying to fight through this without it. Of course we're gonna be short that one bolt right there. We'll get it figured out. Oh yeah, it just barely doesn't want to fit. Of course. Of course. Come on. We can do it. Yeah, we got it. Heck yeah. Laziness for the win. I'm just really excited, honestly. I just want to see this thing open. So excited that I don't even feel like running back to the garage to grab an extension. These right here, they're all bent up, but these are little heat shields to protect your spark plug wires from your factory cast manifolds, and these can be bent back into proper shape if you wanted to reuse them. By the way, these old NiCad snap-on impacts that I have, these things are ancient. I forget when they're from. Let's see if there's a year on them. No, there's not, but I used to work for Snap-on for about a year when I left the active duty army, and I drove the rock and roll toolbox truck on Long Island. And one of the guys I was working with, some guy traded these things in and just didn't want them anymore. He's gonna toss them out. He gave them to me. I'm like, you can't beat having decent parts. And the fun part is they're NiCad batteries and these motors. If any of you guys grew up with an uncle like I did who loved slot cars, like vintage little, I don't know what scale they are, but you know, they're Matchbox car size slot cars with the little tiny electric motors in them and the two brass little feeler guys that kind of ride on the track in front of them. Same exact smell. Okay, that be that. We'll get this chain out of the way so it doesn't interfere with our little head removal. And normally when you're pulling off a head, if it's not been taken off ever or in a long time, you probably want to get a pry bar, stick it here in this heat crossover or something and kind of give yourself a little pop it out. But because of where we're at right now, it should be pretty easy. Here's a real small example of kind of what you would do. Make sure that you don't let it dive down and crack your feet. There are two alignment dowel pins that hold in your big block cylinder heads. And once the cylinder head pops up and goes beyond those dowel pins, it's just gonna go and hit the deck. Never had it happen to me. I'm wearing steel toes just in case, but it could happen. Almost had it happen to me. And here we are. You can actually see
This is the factory original with the Pentastar on it head gasket, and I'll show you guys in just a second. That made it easy. So you can see right here, this is the original factory head gasket, and they're pretty easy to identify because they're just a stamped steel piece like this. You'll see all these kind of ridge marks all around from where it kind of mates around the head. You've got a code printed right here in the Chrysler Pentastar, which is a dead giveaway that these are the original factory cylinder head gaskets, which means another good indication that this engine never had been gone through before, because typically when people do any head work or go down into the cylinders, you'll throw a new set of head gaskets on, because these could be reused. They're not like the Felpro ones that kind of mush up. You know, these are steel, but yeah, pretty cool to see. So we'll go further now into the engine. All right, though, enough waiting. Let's see what we've got going on here. It looks really good and really promising down these cylinder walls. I am liking what I'm seeing. There is no ridge up at the top of these walls. Holy crap. When you hear people talk about a ridge at the top of the cylinder wall, basically where the top of the piston stops, there's going to be an area where the bottom side, actually here, I'll show you guys. So for a 1978 motor like this, these probably would have sat just a little bit below deck, which means when the piston came all the way up to top dead center, it probably wasn't flush with the deck height here, meaning this surface right here. The top of the piston probably stopped a few thousandths short, maybe just a little bit under the top. However, though, the top piston ring, which is seen right here, is where you're gonna see that ridge line and that clean area kind of stop in the cylinder wall. That darker area up top, where you're seeing all the deposits and you know, gunked up oil and fuel burnt up here, is not going to be scraped by that piston ring. So that piston ring, which is right here, which you can see is about, you know, a 1/4 inch down from the top height of the piston, matches right here, and that's where your ridge is going to develop. You got a super high mile engine. Every time that piston goes up and down the bore, it's going to be scraping away and eating away. And especially if it's being beat up, you know, you've got a little bit more of a performance engine, you're just rough on it, that piston could be slapping the side of the wall. The skirt would be scraping, you know, the cylinder wall a little bit. That little film of oil lubrication could be compromised, and you've actually got metal on metal, and it can start eating away on the cylinder wall. And then you're actually going to develop what they call a ridge, where you can catch here with your fingernail where that piston stopped every time it made its way all the way down and up and started to eat away at that wall. And you would have up here your standard bore size and diameter for a 440 Mopar would be 4.320 inches in an opening. And we can get a micrometer on here and show you guys that measurement. But I can just tell just by looking at this thing, it's got to be standard bore. I mean, all the indications are here. But nonetheless, you'd be seeing a 4.320 diameter opening up here at the top where this dark mark is, but then below it, you could probably catch your fingernail down and it would actually step down and this way over further, because it would have been eaten away at this wall a little bit. So you'd actually have a ridge on the wall, which would indicate high miles, high wear, potentially high abuse. So this is another key sign to show that this engine very well may have been that 13,000 mile motorhome engine that is so coveted and talked about as a great grab off this exact thing. Facebook Marketplace, eBay, you know, these little around town kind of scores that you've seen, we just did. So pretty freaking cool. Another cool thing to look at as we're looking down the bore of the cylinder is the crankshaft journal. That shiny part there is where the bottom side of the rod, the connecting rod here for the piston, actually connects to the crankshaft, and these bearings are riding on that journal, that smooth surface there as it rotates around. And if this thing was really beat up and beat to hell, you'd have a whole bunch of scoring and gashes and marks and nicks and cuts on that thing. But you could see this thing is in really great shape. Continue looking at the rest of the journals on this crank. Super clean, and honestly the crankshaft itself is just really clean. Like, this thing almost looks like it just came out of the machine shop, to be honest. This is really, really good stuff. I'm happy. This is a score. This is absolutely a score. May not be 13,000 miles, could be 28, could be 42, whatever it is, but it is definitely a low mile engine. Low miles enough to be this clean and this without wear, but maybe just enough mileage to have captured, you know, enough of this soot and depositing at the top of the cylinder and the top of the piston. So yeah, this guy's is a really good score. And this is what I'm talking about. Just sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. And this one happens to be that right here. You know, not every single day you get an engine that is a great start like this, but lo and behold, here it is. All right, let's satisfy all of our curiosity here and know for sure if this is truly standard bore. I'm saying it is. I mean, there's no way somebody wound up putting this thing back together looking this clean and used all the original head gaskets and all this sort of stuff. It all indicates to factory standard bore, but let's get ourselves a look here on the mic. You gotta be kidding me. I just dropped the little battery cover down into the oil pan. I guess I'll get that whenever I take this engine apart. But we're showing 4.29, 4.30, and obviously they didn't build these things under bore from the factory with less than the 4.32. So we see 4.3, 4.31. That little bit of amount of corrosion and stuff at the top could be making up that tiny hair. But this is a standard bore 440, just like we thought. Way freaking cool. Can actually see that little plastic piece off the micrometer, so I think I'll be able to fish it out, and otherwise by the time I get to building this thing I might even forget what the thing even is in there and throw it out, so we'll get it. Okay, got a little painter's tape on a steel rod. Let's see if we can't get that. Heck yeah. Just did not want that sitting in the engine. Got it. And that is a win. Heck yeah. One final note too, I'll pull off that other cylinder head and do the same thing. Obviously these walls, as we've looked at, aren't perfect. They're gonna need a little bit of honing to clean this up, but still I don't wanna put it back totally dry. Looks like they're still pretty lubricated, but just in case, we'll give them a little spray down at WD-40 because we'll prevent any future flash rust, surface rust. Also getting on those crank journals too. And keep everything as nice as can be as this engine waits for its glorious day to be put into one of our Mopar muscle cars. Heck yeah. Take care of your stuff and it'll take care of you. I also just poured a sample out from this torque converter. Pretty rich, smells pretty burnt, no longer nice and reddish color the way the transmission fluid should be. It's turned kind of a brownish color, so this tranny definitely maybe did a lot of towing, was abused, I don't know. Super clean though, but this fluid says that it was worked hard. Here's a little tip I developed with this cherry picker too. These legs always want to fall forward, and if you're moving this thing around and you own these, you know what I'm talking about. They'll like fall forward and make you think they're gonna smack you in the head. So I run a bungee cord behind it and I loop it through on this chain that I've got behind it, so this way it keeps these legs from falling forward as you're moving it down the driveway and don't feel like you're gonna get your head smashed in. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with us on this video. I know it's not every single day that you come across an engine in a deal like this, but that's why I kind of wanted to showcase this, show what's still floating out there. Not every time you're gonna find something this good. Unfortunately, the guy I bought this thing from kind of ripped it apart. It looks to me like this engine would have been pretty great as a short block. Probably could have cleaned up a few things, thrown a different cam in it, maybe put a different set of heads on this thing, and honestly would have had a pretty decent 300 horsepower engine to throw around in a muscle car and have some fun with. But now it kind of forces us to go ahead and clean this thing up and kind of rebuild it back a little bit better than it is. But honestly, we'll save a lot of time whenever we do that because we will not need to bore these cylinder walls. We checked them both with the micrometer, at least on this side, 4.32 standard bore. A quick little hone on these things, get a nice little cross hatch in those cylinders. New set of pistons, keep the rods, new bearings, new cam, lifters, maybe different heads, maybe clean these up, who knows, and got ourselves a really nice street performance engine. So that being said, we appreciate you guys hanging out for this video. There's always something that we're looking out for, and as some of you guys know, we had our first baby, which is really exciting. Can't wait to build cars with him as he grows older. But in this meantime, I kind of sometimes wind up looking around Facebook Marketplace and other areas, and who knows what I'll come across next and what next little project or wild thing I'll wind up doing here is. And until then, hope you guys enjoy this stuff. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, show up for the next video, hang out with us. See you guys in the next video. Bye.
behind me, and it is yes, you can still do it, and I'm going to show you exactly how.